The lecture hall of the cosmos. The lecture hall of Zilorian Prime was not a place for the ordinary. It was the most prestigious university in the Orion Arm, where the brightest students from hundreds of species came to learn about the laws of life and death that shaped the galaxy. The hall itself was vast, curved walls of crystal that shimmered with the light of 1,000 stars beyond, while in the center rose a floating podium where Professor Thrix hovered with a mantle of authority, draped across his scaled shoulders. He was a Zilorian elder, his skin a shimmering green and gold, his eyes glowing with the knowledge of centuries, and when he spoke, the sound rolled like thunder through the chamber. Every student sat in silence, their attention drawn by the weight of his words today. The professor announced, his long fingers spreading across the projection globe. We speak of the apex predators of our galaxy, the creatures that rule their worlds not by chance but by dominance, those that even the bravest hunters will not dare approach. The globe shimmered, revealing the image of a massive beast, its body plated in obsidian armor, its mouth bristling, with teeth longer than swords. The Tarkun of Dravanis, he declared, a creature that hunts with no fear, that can crush armored transports in its jaws. A Tarkun does not stalk its prey with stealth, it charges, and nothing survives. The alien students gasped, their antennae twitching, their scales rippling, their wings folding tighter against their backs. It was the kind of fear mixed with awe that every species understood when gazing at death made flesh. The professor continued, his globe shifting again to reveal a creature of living fire from the lava world of Pyrrhus. This is the Ignara, a being that breathes molten flame and swims through rivers of lava. Its heat signature is so intense that even orbiting satellites struggle to map it. On its world, nothing dares rise higher than insects, for the Ignara burns entire nests to ash simply by passing over them. The alien students whispered among themselves, their voices hushed in reverence and terror. To them, this was knowledge not just of biology but of survival. For in the galaxy the difference between predator and prey was everything. But one student did not gasp, did not whisper, did not show the fear or reverence the others did. He sat, quietly, a human by the name of Daniel Carter, his dark eyes steady, his hands folded on the table before him. He listened, yes, but there was no shock in his expression. He had heard tales of monsters before. He had even studied them. But something in him seemed unimpressed. His fellow classmates noticed, and they exchanged glances. One whispered in clicks, another in hisses, wondering why the fragile human did not react like the others. Humans were supposed to be from a young species, barely out of their cradle, and known for their reckless exploration, not for their strength or ferocity. Professor Thrix's lecture carried on, his pride and his knowledge swelling with every word. The projection shifted again, this time showing a monstrous serpent longer than a city block, its body armored with scales that could deflect plasma bolts. Behold the Silith of the gas giant Yorin, a predator so vast that it swims the hydrogen storms and devours entire flocks of sky grazers. Its senses can detect heartbeats miles away, and once it has chosen its prey, nothing escapes. More gasps, more awe, more wonder. To the alien students, this was a lesson that would stay etched in their minds, proof that nature itself crafted. Terrors beyond imagination. Still Daniel did not move, and the professor's eyes narrowed, his reptilian gaze flicking toward the young man. There was something about the human's calm demeanor that unsettled him, though he dismissed it quickly. Humans were strange, but they were soft creatures, too fragile to stand among the names he was presenting. Surely the boy was simply lost in thought. The list of predators grew as the lecture continued. Beasts of acid seas, monsters born in void, parasites that controlled entire herds, each one deadlier than the last. And at the end, the professor raised his clawed hand high and proclaimed, "And thus you see, these are the apex predators of our galaxy. Nothing surpasses them. Nothing stands above them. Here is the final truth of the food chain among the stars." The projection faded into darkness, leaving the chamber silent. Every student holding their breath at the magnificence of the lesson. Every student but one. Daniel Carter leaned forward slightly, his voice calm, his words carrying across the hall with unexpected weight. "You missed one," he said, his tone so even that it cut through the silence like a blade. The hall erupted in confusion. Some students chittered with laughter, others hissed in disbelief, a few even jeered. A human correcting Professor Thrix? A fragile mammal from a death world of middling size daring to claim the professor's list was incomplete? The very idea was absurd, but the human student did not flinch. He met the professor's gaze, and for the first time in that hall, the mighty Thrix felt the faintest trace of unease. The omitted predator. The silence that followed Daniel's words was almost alive, as if the very air in the hall had frozen. The alien students turned in their seats, their different colored eyes glowing with amusement and disbelief. A small-bodied Akrithi with translucent wings leaned forward and clicked, her mandibles together in mock laughter, while a hulking brawn warrior let out a booming chuckle that echoed across the chamber. To them it was a joke, a weak mammal trying to insert himself into a list that was carved by millennia of terror and blood. Professor Thrix raised his clawed hand, silencing the laughter with a single gesture, though his own expression was caught, somewhere between irritation and curiosity. He narrowed his glowing eyes at the human and said, "Explain yourself, student. What predator do you claim I have overlooked?" Daniel remained calm, his voice steady and controlled as he rose from his seat. He did not raise his voice, yet every creature present heard him as if his words carried their own gravity. "You listed the Tarkun, the Ignara, the Silith, and many others. Each is terrifying in its own way. They are stronger, faster, larger, and more dangerous than anything most species could imagine. But you left out the one predator that has no equal, the one that does not rely on claws or fangs, the one that hunts not just for food, but for reasons beyond survival. You forgot about us. You forgot about humans." Gasps and scoffs rippled through the hall. The brawn warrior shook his massive head in disbelief, his tusks gleaming under the hall's starlights. The Akrithi student buzzed her wings in irritation. A scaled Vren from the back shouted in a hissing voice, "Humans are weak. Fragile bodies, no armor, no venom, no wings, no speed. You are prey to almost everything." Laughter followed his words, filling the hall again. Daniel did not laugh, and he did not raise his voice in defense. Instead, he spoke with the same calm tone, each word cutting through the noise like a steady blade. "Fragile, yes. No armor, yes. Slower, yes. But tell me, what other species stalks predators for sport? What other creature fights beasts larger than itself, not because it must, but because it chooses? What other being creates weapons not just to defend itself, but to dominate entire environments?" He paused and let the silence stretch. His eyes scanned the room slowly, meeting the gaze of reptile, insect, mammal, and avian alike. "Humans do not just survive predators. We make predators fear us." The laughter faltered, not fully silenced, but shaken with unease. "Professor One." Thrix tapped his clawed hand against the podium, studying the young man with renewed interest. He tilted his head slightly, his crest rising as he said, "You speak boldly, human, but words are easy. Stories are easier still. You claim your kind are predators equal or greater to the ones I have listed, yet every report I have read describes your kind as reckless explorers, spreading quickly but dying easily. Where is your proof of this apex you speak of?" Daniel nodded, as if expecting the question, and began to speak again, this time recounting the history of his species. "On Earth, our home, we were born without fangs sharp enough to kill, without claws strong enough to tear, without speed to outrun, without strength to overpower. Yet we hunted. We tracked animals across endless plains until they collapsed from exhaustion. We built weapons from stone, from bone, from fire, and with them we brought down creatures larger than us. Mammoths, giant cats, beasts that once ruled our lands fell to humans working together. We are persistence hunters. We chase until the prey gives up. No other predator in the galaxy does this. We kill not in moments of surprise, but in long, relentless pursuit." A hush fell over the students, the mocking laughter fading into silence once more. The Vren who had mocked him earlier now stared, his tongue flicking nervously. Daniel pressed on, his eyes unwavering. And as we grew, we did not stop. We did not need to fight predators anymore, yet we continued. We made challenges out of the hunt. We tamed the strongest animals and bent them to our will. We built ships to cross seas, then skies, then stars. No barrier, no environment, no predator has ever ended us. We are not the largest, not the fastest, not the strongest, but we are the most relentless, and that makes us the most dangerous. Professor Thrix studied him closely, his mind turning over the words. For centuries he had catalogued predators, measured their strengths, recorded their kills, but never had he considered intent. The beasts he listed killed because they must. They fed because they had to. They fought because survival demanded it. But this human spoke of hunting for choice, of killing because it was possible, of bending the laws of nature not through instinct but through will. It was a thought that unsettled him, though he did not show it. At last the professor spoke again. Your words are bold, human, but in this hall boldness is not enough. If you truly claim your kind belongs on this list, then you will prove it. The galaxy respects only evidence, not empty pride. His glowing eyes narrowed, and his voice deepened like a distant storm. Will you accept the challenge to demonstrate this truth? Daniel's answer came without hesitation, his voice firm and unwavering. Yes, I will prove it. The hall erupted once more, not with laughter this time, but with shock. For the first time, the other students looked at the human not as prey, but with the first shadow of unease, as if they were beginning to realize they might be sharing a room with something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined, the challenge of proof. The challenge hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to break, and every student in the grand lecture hall leaned forward in anticipation. Professor Thrix stood with his scaled hands folded behind his back, his crest slightly raised as he regarded Daniel with the cold patience of a scientist waiting for a specimen to reveal its secrets. The alien students whispered in a dozen tongues, some with voices like hissing steam and others with clicks that echoed against the crystal walls. They could not believe what they had just witnessed, a human daring not only to speak against the professor's authority, but also to accept a challenge that no other young species would have considered. To them it was arrogance, perhaps even madness. Yet beneath the laughter and scorn there was a flicker of something new, a seed of doubt. Daniel remained standing, his posture calm but his eyes alive with fire. He did not look around at the laughing students, he looked only at Professor Thrix as if the rest of the galaxy no longer mattered. His voice, though steady and low, carried through the chamber with a strength that was not born of volume, but of conviction. You ask for proof and I will give it, but understand this, Professor. The proof you want cannot be measured by scales or by teeth or by strength alone. Humans are predators because we choose to be, because we make survival into something more than instinct. We turn it into strategy, into innovation, into domination. The professor tilted his head, his reptilian eyes narrowing in study. Then prove it with demonstration, he said slowly, each word deliberate. In this very institution, we have access to the greatest collection of life forms captured and contained for research. If you claim that your species is a predator greater than the ones I have listed, you will face one and show us. Not with words, not with stories, but with survival. The hall filled with noise, students erupting into shouts of disbelief and excitement. Some begged the professor not to waste time, certain the human would be torn apart in moments, while others urged him to allow it for the spectacle. Daniel did not hesitate, his eyes unwavering as he answered, I will face whatever you place before me, but I will not bring armor, I will not bring advanced weapons, because humanity's strength has never been in brute force. Our strength is in how we think, how we adapt, how we turn the world itself into our weapon. A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. The brawn warrior who had laughed earlier now frowned, the tusks at his jawline twitching as he muttered in his native tongue. The insectoid Akriti beat her wings nervously. Even the Vren who had mocked Daniel now fell silent. They all knew of the arena of beasts, a place where the galaxy's deadliest predators were studied under controlled conditions. To face one unarmed was to invite certain death. Yet the human spoke as though death were merely another obstacle, one he expected. To overcome, Professor Thrix raised his clawed hand for silence, and the voices died quickly. "Very well," he said at last, his tone heavy with finality. "Tomorrow, in the arena, you will face the Varkun. It is a predator I named earlier in this lecture. Armored in scales, jaws strong enough to tear through transport plating, feared, even by those who command fleets. You will enter its domain, and if you survive, perhaps then you may claim the title of predator. If you fail, you will serve as proof that humans are nothing more than overconfident prey." The words sent another ripple through the hall, but this time the laughter was quieter, almost forced, as though the students themselves were no longer entirely certain. Some still mocked Daniel, whispering that his species' arrogance would finally be exposed, while others shifted uneasily in their seats. There was something about the humans' calm acceptance that unnerved them, something that reminded them of predators they had once seen not on hollow screens but with their own eyes, predators that did not roar or boast but waited in silence, calculating, patient, deadly. Daniel sat down again, his eyes never leaving the professor. The faintest trace of a smile touched his lips, not of joy, but of certainty. He knew the weight of what he had just agreed to, and he carried it without fear. Around him, the alien students kept their distance, some sneering, others whispering, all of them watching him as though he had suddenly transformed into something unfamiliar. Perhaps they were beginning to see that there was more to the human than fragile skin and soft bones. Perhaps they were beginning to sense that behind those calm eyes was something they did not understand, and that ignorance was starting to frighten them. As the hall emptied and the whispers spread through the corridors of the university, Daniel remained in his seat for a long moment. He thought of Earth, of endless hunts across plains where his ancestors had chased prey until it collapsed, of fires that had kept the darkness at bay, of battles fought not only against animals, but against one another. Humanity had always been forced to adapt, and in adaptation they had found power. Tomorrow would be no different. Tomorrow he would show them what it meant to be human. And somewhere deep inside, though he would never admit it aloud, Daniel felt a strange anticipation, not dread but a predator's hunger, as if part of him was eager for the test to come. The arena of beasts, the next day, dawned on Zalorian Prime with skies of deep violet streaked by silver clouds, and within the heart of the university the arena of beasts stirred to life. It was not often that students were permitted to witness a live demonstration, but word of the humans' challenge had spread faster than fire across dry grass. Hundreds of students filled the rising tiers of the arena, their eyes glowing, wings twitching, mandibles clacking and scales shifting as excitement built. The arena itself was vast, its floor a shifting landscape of rock, sand, and mechanical structures designed to mimic different hunting grounds, a place where predators could be studied in controlled chaos. At the center of it all stood Daniel Carter, alone and unarmed. His simple student uniform looked fragile against the backdrop of the arena, his body slight compared to the towering bulk of alien classmates who watched from safety. Yet he did not tremble, did not flinch, did not show fear. He stood with his shoulders square and his eyes scanning the terrain, taking in every detail, every ridge of stone, every shadow where danger might emerge. His calmness unsettled many in the crowd, for they expected panic, yet what they saw was focus. Professor Thrix hovered above on his podium, his voice amplified across the chamber. Today we test the claim of this human, who says his species deserves to stand among the galaxy's apex predators. He will face the Varkun, one of the deadliest creatures known. If he survives, then perhaps we will acknowledge what he says. If he fails, he will serve as a lesson to all who mistake boldness for strength. His clawed hand gestured to the gates at the far end of the arena, and the steel doors began to grind open with a sound like thunder. From the darkness beyond, the Varkun emerged. The beast was colossal, its body armored in jagged scales that shimmered like obsidian knives, its eyes glowing with a cold, predatory hunger. Its maw opened to reveal rows of teeth capable of tearing metal, and its low growl shook the arena floor. The alien students gasped and hissed in awe, some crying out in excitement, others muttering wagers on how long the human would last. Daniel did not move at first. He watched as the creature stepped into the light, its heavy claws gouging furrows in the stone. He studied the way it moved, the tilt of its head, the way its tail shifted to balance its weight. He did not see only a monster. He saw patterns, weaknesses, instincts. He whispered to himself words his ancestors had lived by: patience and observation. First action later. The Varkun roared and charged, its bulk shaking the arena as it thundered forward. Many in the crowd flinched, expecting Daniel to run, but instead he moved to the side in a sudden burst of speed, his body low and controlled. The creature slammed into stone where he had been standing, crushing it to dust, but Daniel was already moving, circling, searching for advantage. He did not fight with panic, he fought with calculation. The students shouted, some jeering, others surprised, as the human picked up shards of broken stone left by the creature's charge. He weighed them in his hand, tested their edges, and then, with precision, hurled one at the Varkun's eye. The shard struck, not deep enough to blind but enough to sting, and the beast roared in fury, thrashing its head. Daniel did not waste the moment. He sprinted toward a broken pillar and climbed, quickly, using height to force the beast to follow. Professor Thrix leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. The human was not fighting like prey. He was using the arena itself as a weapon. Each move was deliberate, each choice made not with desperation, but with intent. The Varkun lunged, its claws tearing through the pillar, but Daniel leapt aside at the last instant, rolling to safety and rising again with another shard in his hand. The fight was not strength against strength, it was thought against instinct. The Varkun relied on terror and raw power, while Daniel relied on patience and cunning. Each time the creature attacked, he gave ground only to use what it left behind: broken stone, loose debris, cracks in the arena wall. Slowly, the alien audience began to fall silent, the laughter gone, replaced with a dawning realization. They were not watching prey. They were watching a predator who had chosen his hunt. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Daniel lured the beast into a narrow section of the arena, its massive body struggling to turn in the confined space. With one final move, Daniel darted aside, baiting the Varkun into slamming headfirst into a reinforced wall. The impact shook the arena and stunned the creature, its armored head wedged for a moment in fractured stone. Daniel moved quickly, seizing a jagged shard as long as his arm, and drove it with all his strength into the softer flesh beneath the creature's jaw. The beast howled, thrashing wildly, but the wound was enough to send it crashing to the ground, in defeat. Silence fell across the arena. The alien students sat frozen, unable to process what they had just witnessed. A human, unarmed, had faced the Varkun and lived. More than that, he had defeated it, not with brute force but with relentless will and cunning thought. Professor Thrix remained still for a long moment, his eyes locked on Daniel before finally lowering his gaze in something close to respect, though his voice betrayed none of it when he said, "The test is not yet finished." Daniel stood over, the fallen beast breathing hard but unshaken, his eyes meeting those of the professor. He knew this was only the beginning, that the true challenge was still to come, and he welcomed it with the quiet certainty of a predator who had tasted blood. Predator meets human. The fallen body of the Varkun lay heavy on the arena floor, its armored hide cracked and its great jaws hanging open as the sound of its final roar still echoed in the ears of the students. For a long moment there was only silence. Not the silence of indifference but of disbelief, the kind that grips a crowd when they realize something they thought impossible has unfolded before their eyes. The alien students stared at the human, who stood among the dust and rubble, his uniform torn, his arms scratched and bloodied but his eyes sharp and steady. He did not lift his hands in triumph or shout in victory. He only stood watching the creature breathe its last, his expression unreadable, as though he had simply completed a task that needed doing. Professor Thrix watched as well, his clawed fingers tapping against the podium in a rhythm that betrayed his inner turmoil. He had expected the human to die quickly, to be a lesson in arrogance, but instead the boy had turned the arena into a battlefield of thought and will. Still, the professor was not ready to yield, for one victory could be dismissed as chance and he needed certainty before he would ever rewrite his list of the galaxy's predators. His crest flickered with resolve as he raised his voice across the arena and declared, "Impressive, but one creature does not prove your claim. You will face another, for true predators do not triumph once by accident. They triumph again and again through intent." The students gasped and whispered, some eager to see more, others uneasy with the idea of testing the human further. Daniel looked up at the professor and gave a simple nod. He did not argue or protest as though this was what he had expected all along. His voice carried evenly when he spoke. "Then bring whatever you wish. I will face them as I am." The gates at the far end of the arena rumbled once more, and from the darkness came a new terror. This one was smaller than the Varcoon but faster, its body lean and sinewy, its limbs long and tipped with razor claws. Its eyes glowed a pale white, and its breath came in low snarls as it crouched low to the ground, moving with the fluid grace of a predator designed to stalk and pounce. The professor's voice named it for the crowd. The Dravari, a hunter from the moon world of Syros, where endless twilight allows it to stalk prey for days without rest. Few creatures ever see it before it strikes, for its speed is unmatched. The Dravari circled, its claws scraping against stone, its movements fast and precise. Daniel turned slowly with it, his eyes locked on the creature, his breathing steady though sweat now clung to his skin. The alien students leaned forward in their seats, whispering predictions of how quickly the human would fall this time. They could not see how a fragile body could withstand the speed of the Dravari, yet they did not understand that Daniel was not relying on strength, nor on speed alone. He was relying on the oldest of human instincts, the hunter's patience. The creature lunged, a blur of claws and teeth, but Daniel dropped low, rolling aside as the beast struck the ground where he had been. Dust rose, and Daniel's hand closed around a shard of broken stone from the ruined pillar. He gripped it tightly, his eyes never leaving the Dravari as it turned with startling speed. The beast lunged again, and again Daniel avoided it, not by outrunning it, but by predicting its movement, reading the rhythm of its body. Each dodge brought him closer to the arena wall, where loose fragments of stone lay waiting. The Dravari snarled and leapt once more, but this time Daniel did not retreat. He stepped aside at the last moment, thrusting the shard into the creature's flank. It screamed, twisting in rage, its claws slashing across his arm, tearing cloth and flesh. Pain burned, blood flowed, but Daniel did not falter. He pressed, forward, striking again, forcing the creature back with sheer will. The students gasped, for it was not brute strength that drove him, but relentless determination, the refusal to yield even when wounded. The Dravari leapt again, but Daniel was ready. He had dragged it into a narrow section of the arena where its speed was less effective. When it lunged, he ducked beneath its claws and drove the stone shard into its throat. The creature thrashed, gurgling in rage, before collapsing into the dust with a final shudder. Daniel staggered back, his chest heaving, his arm bleeding, yet his eyes were sharp and alive. The arena was silent again, but this silence was different from before. It was heavier, filled not with disbelief but with fear. The alien students no longer looked at Daniel as a foolish human who had stumbled into survival. They looked at him as something far more unsettling. He had faced not one, but two predators, and had emerged alive, each victory not by luck but by thought, by calculation, by the unshakable will to endure. Professor Thrix's eyes burned as he studied the human. Twice now his expectations had been broken, and though he tried to keep his composure, unease crept into his voice when he finally spoke. "You have survived again, human, and I cannot deny what I have seen. But understand, survival is not the same as dominance. One more test will decide if your kind truly belongs on the list of the galaxy's apex predators." Daniel met the professor's gaze, blood dripping down his arm, his face calm despite exhaustion. His words were steady, carrying across the arena with the same weight as before. "Then bring what you will. Humanity does not stop after 2 hunts. We never stop." The students shivered at the words, for in them they heard not arrogance but something far more dangerous, the voice of a predator that did not know when to quit. Fear and respect. The air inside the arena grew heavy as the second beast's body lay still in the dust, and the students who filled the tiered seats no longer jeered or laughed. Their wings twitched uneasily, their scales shifted with nervous colors, their antennae quivered with confusion. What they had seen was not luck, nor was it desperation. It was something colder and sharper. The human had faced two predators of renown and survived, not by overwhelming power but by relentless thought and adaptation. A predator that adapts is far more dangerous than one that relies only on tooth and claw, and deep within their instincts. The alien students began to feel it. The creeping chill of fear. Professor Thrix had not spoken for some time, his clawed hands gripping the podium with unusual tension. He had wanted to expose the arrogance of this young human, to remind the students of the hierarchy of life, but instead, his carefully ordered lecture had turned into a challenge that unsettled even him. His pride as a scholar fought against the evidence before him. He could not deny the human had triumphed twice, yet the stubbornness of his mind refused to yield completely. His crest rose and fell as he finally spoke, his voice carrying across the arena like a storm that struggled to remain controlled. Twice you have survived, but predators are not measured by chance or by singular victories. The galaxy demands consistency, and so you will face one more. Daniel stood bleeding, his arm wrapped with makeshift cloth torn from his uniform, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of exhaustion. Yet his eyes remained steady. He did not plead for rest. He did not question the professor's demand. He simply nodded once as if it was only natural that the challenge would continue. His calmness unsettled the crowd even more than his victories, for prey begged and predators did not. The gates rumbled a third time, and from the shadows emerged, not one but two creatures. The first was a massive quadruped with horns like blackened spears jutting from its head, its bulk covered in armored hide, its roar shaking dust from the rafters. Beside it slithered a serpentine predator with scales that shimmered like liquid metal, its body long enough to coil around transports, its eyes glowing with cold hunger. Gasps spread through the audience, for never before had two predators been tested against a single challenger. Even some of the students who had mocked Daniel earlier now whispered protests, declaring that it was unfair, but Professor Thrix silenced them with a raised claw. His voice carried a sharp edge when he spoke. Apex predators are not measured by fairness. They are measured by their ability to stand against the impossible. The two beasts advanced across the arena, their movements different but united in purpose. Daniel did not move to run. He bent low, picking up shards of stone and broken fragments left from the earlier battles. He studied the terrain once again, eyes searching for high ground, narrow passages, anything he could turn to advantage. He did not see just monsters. He saw obstacles waiting to be solved. The quadruped charged first, its horns lowered, but Daniel sprinted toward the wall and climbed quickly, forcing the beast to slam into stone where he had been moments before. Dust rained down and Daniel leapt onto its back, jamming a jagged shard into the crease of its armored plates. The beast bellowed and bucked, thrashing violently until Daniel was thrown clear. He hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his side, but before he could rise, the serpentine predator lunged, its body whipping around him. Daniel rolled, just as its coils slammed down, barely escaping being crushed. The alien students shouted, in disbelief. Some screamed that it was over, yet the human kept moving, bleeding, staggering, but never stopping. He picked up another shard, his eyes sharp with determination. The quadruped charged again, but Daniel lured it toward the serpent, darting aside at the last second so that the beast's horns slashed into the coils. The serpent hissed in fury and struck back at the larger beast, the two predators turning on one another in rage. Daniel had not only survived, he had redirected their instincts, twisting predator against predator. As the two monsters battled, Daniel used the chaos to climb the broken pillar once more. From there, he studied their movements, waiting, calculating. When the serpent coiled around the quadruped and the larger beast toppled to the ground, Daniel leapt down, driving a shard into the serpent's eye. The creature shrieked and writhed, releasing its hold, and in that moment of confusion, Daniel seized a fallen piece of broken armor from the quadruped's back and drove it with both hands into the serpent's throat. The beast collapsed, its thrashing slowing, its glow fading, and the arena fell into stunned silence once again. Daniel stood among the fallen creatures, his chest heaving, his arms trembling from exertion, yet his eyes burned with the fire of victory. He had not only survived 3 trials, he had turned each into proof that humans were not prey. The alien students no longer laughed, no longer whispered in mockery. They watched him in silence, their faces shifting from disbelief to something deeper, respect mixed with unease. They had seen cunning, endurance, and will that no other predator displayed. They had seen choice. Professor Thrix lowered his crest, his voice quieter now, though still strong. "Perhaps I was wrong," he admitted slowly. "Perhaps the galaxy has overlooked a predator that hunts not with strength alone, but with mind, with will, with relentlessness." His eyes locked on Daniel, and for the first time there was no arrogance in them, only the weight of recognition. Perhaps humanity is indeed the one predator we forgot. The students shifted in their seats, and though none spoke, the truth hung in the air like an unspoken law. They were no longer looking at a fragile creature. They were looking at a predator that had chosen its hunt, a predator that could not be measured by claws or fangs, a predator that wore the face of humanity, the forgotten apex. The arena floor was littered with dust and the fallen bodies of creatures that once struck fear across entire star systems, and in the center of that devastation stood Daniel Carter, bloodied but unbroken. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, his body bore wounds from claw and fang, yet his eyes still carried the same calm fire that had never wavered since the beginning. The alien students who had gathered to witness the spectacle sat frozen, in their seats, their mocking voices silenced, their laughter gone. What filled the chamber now was a silence heavy with realization, the kind of silence that comes when a truth too great to ignore settles upon every mind at once. Professor Thrix remained on his podium, his scaled hands gripping the edge tightly, his crest lowered as his gaze fixed on the human below. He had begun this lesson certain of his knowledge, certain of his list of predators carved from centuries of study, but now that certainty trembled. He had seen the human face not 1, not 2, but 3 predators in succession, each more dangerous than the last, and survive. Not by brute strength, not by natural weapons, not by sheer luck, but by relentless will and unyielding cunning. It was a kind of predation the professor had never truly accounted for, one born not of instinct but of choice. Daniel looked up at him, his voice low but carrying clearly through the arena. "You asked for proof, Professor. You demanded survival, not once but again and again. I have given you that proof. Humanity does not hunt because it must. We hunt because it chooses us, because it is who we are. You listed the predators of the galaxy, but you forgot the one that never stops, the one that turns every environment into its weapon, the one that looks at impossibility and refuses to bow. You forgot humans." The words cut through the chamber, like a blade. The alien students shifted uneasily, their instincts urging them to deny it, yet their eyes betrayed the truth. They had watched with their own senses as the human outwitted monsters that no prey should ever escape. They had seen how he endured pain and exhaustion without surrender. They had seen something more dangerous than teeth or claws, something that unsettled even the bravest among them, the will to dominate not just for survival, but for certainty. Professor Thrix closed his eyes for a long moment, then opened them, again his gaze sharp and resigned. "Perhaps I was blind," he admitted at last, his voice no longer heavy with arrogance but with reluctant respect. "The galaxy has measured predators by instinct and by strength, but instinct falters and strength fades. What I have seen today cannot be denied. Humanity is not prey. Humanity is not fragile. Humanity is the predator that thinks, that plans, that endures beyond reason. Humanity is the predator that even predators must fear." A murmur spread through the audience, not of disbelief this time, but of acceptance, though it was laced with unease. The brawn warrior who had once laughed now stared at Daniel with wide eyes, his tusks trembling with nervous energy. The insectoid Akrithi folded her wings tightly against her body, her mandibles clicking in agitation. Even the sharp-tongued Vren, who had mocked him earlier, bowed his head ever so slightly, a gesture of respect born from fear. The truth had reached them all. Daniel did not smile, did not revel in triumph. He simply nodded once, his expression steady. "We are the predator you missed," he said softly, but the words carried weight far greater than their volume. They echoed across the arena, etched into the minds of every listener, a declaration that would not fade with time. The professor straightened, lifting his clawed hand to address the hall. Let it be recorded in the archives of this institution that humanity shall be named among the apex predators of the galaxy. Let this lesson be remembered not only for the beasts that were faced, but for the truth revealed. Strength is not only in the body. Sometimes it lives in the will to endure, and the mind that refuses surrender. His voice trembled slightly, not with weakness but with awe. The students rose slowly, many bowing their heads, others simply staring, but all of them forever changed by what they had witnessed. They had entered the hall to learn about the terrors of the galaxy, but they left with a lesson far greater, that the most dangerous predator did not roar with fangs bared. It walked quietly among them, wearing the face of humanity. Daniel turned from the arena floor and walked toward the exit, his steps steady despite the blood that marked his body. He did not look back at the fallen beasts or at the faces of those who stared at him in silence. He walked as his ancestors had once walked, from the hunt, not in celebration but in certainty, for the hunt was not over and never would be. Humanity was not done, humanity would never be done, and that was the truth that now settled into the hearts of every being in that hall, and so the professor's list was no longer complete without one final name. Humanity, the predator that hunts because it chooses. 2. The predator that never stops. The predator that others fear not for its claws or fangs, but for its will. The predator that had been forgotten until one student stood and reminded the galaxy. The arena no longer echoed with laughter or disbelief, only the heavy silence of revelation. Dust drifted across the floor where the bodies of the beasts lay defeated, their hulking forms reminders of battles that should have ended a human life, yet did not. In the middle of that silence stood Daniel Carter, bruised and bloodied, but unbroken, his eyes steady as though he had known all along this moment would come. Every alien student who had gathered leaned forward, their instincts warring with the truth their eyes could not deny, that a human had faced what they feared and had prevailed. Professor Thrix stood above them, his clawed hands tight against the podium, his crest lowered, his proud voice tempered by the weight of what he had seen. His life had been devoted to cataloging the apex predators of the galaxy, his lectures carved into the foundation of knowledge. But all of it now felt incomplete. He had seen strength before, he had studied instinct, he had measured terror, but never had he considered the predator that was not born from natural weapons or sheer size, the predator that shaped its own path by choice and will. He raised his eyes toward the human, and in a voice that carried no arrogance now, only recognition, he said, "Humanity is not prey. Humanity is the predator I failed to name. Humanity is the one we forgot." The students shifted uneasily in their seats, their wings folding close, their scales trembling with uncertain colors, their mandibles clicking softly. They had once mocked the human as weak, fragile, unworthy, but now they looked at him with respect born of fear. They had seen something different from the beasts they studied. They had seen a predator that did not kill only to eat, that did not hunt only to survive, but one that hunted because it chose to, one that could turn its environment, its mind, and its endurance into weapons more dangerous than any fang or claw. They understood now that humanity was not simply another species reaching for the stars. Humanity was the shadow at the edge of every hunt, the quiet threat that never ceased. Daniel did not smile. He did not boast. He only nodded once at the professor's words. His silence spoke more than triumph could have, for it was not victory he sought but understanding. He had reminded them of what his kind truly was, not fragile, not reckless explorers, but predators that endured ice ages, predators that bent fire to their will, predators that crossed oceans and skies and now crossed stars. The list of apex predators would no longer be complete without humanity at its peak, and that knowledge would echo through the galaxy far longer than this one day, as Daniel walked from the arena floor, his blood staining the stones, his steps unbroken despite the weight of his wounds. The students whispered quietly, not in mockery but in awe. The galaxy had changed in their eyes, and the predator they had once overlooked now stood revealed before them. Humanity was the predator that had been forgotten, The predator that others feared without even knowing why. The predator that would not stop. Humanity was the one they missed. The end.